Welcome, my name's Doctor Warrick Bishop. I'm a cardiologist, I'm an author and a keynote speaker. I'm CEO of the Healthy Heart Network. I'm all about trying to help people live as well as possible for as long as possible. Heart disease is huge in Australia. Every 20 minutes someone suffers a heart attack. Most of these could probably have been avoided if only we knew what to do. This podcast is all about helping you understand blood pressure, weight, cholesterol for better health. If you enjoy this podcast, I would be honoured for a 5-star review. You can share it with your family and friends. It may well save someone you love. Hi, my name is Dr. Warrick Bishop. Welcome to my podcast and videocast station. I'm really pleased today to have the chance to catch up with Dr. Jason Kaplan, a colleague, and it's felt like so long for us to get together. Jason, welcome.
Warrick, thank you very much. And it's great to start 2024 speaking to you and especially talking about cardiovascular health.
Look, Jason and I share a common passion, and that is trying to stop people ending up in the hands of our colleagues who do interventions with balloons and stents and bypasses and all those things. We really want to keep people as well as possible for as long as possible and keep them out of the jaws of intervention if at all possible. So Jason and I share a lot there. Jason, what I thought we might kick off with is really the sort of things that you do for yourself on a day-to-day basis, if you like, your lifestyle choices. And if we share that with the people listening or viewing, just so that they really get that you and I both not just talk the talk, but we walk the walk. So would that be okay with you?
That'd be great. And thank you for inviting me to do so, Warrick. One other point I just want to put forward is that besides just being passionate about preventing cardiac events and people ending up with interventions, I think that you and I share a passion for actually arming people with the tools that they need to do it. And there is so much information out there about lifestyle and dietary choices and heart disease, and to be able to give people really good scientific backed information that they can apply in their day-to-day life is what I feel very passionate about as well.
And in fact, Jason, for those listening and those wondering, you and I are actually doing this on a Sunday afternoon on our own time to make a real and meaningful difference in people's lives, because both you and I know that the best educated people get the best healthcare, and we're so committed to that. We're actually doing this for the greater good and for the benefit of those listening. So please share it. This is gold, this stuff. And thank you again, Jason, for taking time out from your family. I'll just mention to those listening, Jason has 3 kids under 9 years of age. So I've had 2 under that age, and I know it's full on. So all kudos to you, Jason.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Warrick. So look, I think one of the first things I'd like to share with people is that a large part of my dietary program is of plant-based eating. It was my wife, Jessica, who helped bring me on the journey. And then I had the great opportunity to meet Kim Williams and Dean Ornish at one of the American College of Cardiology conferences in 2017. And after meeting Kim Williams, and for people who don't know, Kim was the ex-president of the American College of Cardiology. And Kim actually became vegan after his first heart attack and has been an amazing advocate for plant-based eating for the prevention of cardiovascular disease. And I felt if I was going to be recommending the best dietary pattern for my patients to help prevent heart disease, I wanted to be both an advocate and a practitioner of it. So now for the last 7 years, my wife and I have been just about mostly plant-based in all of our eating. We are fairly close to, I would say we are vegan. We do have some fish, but otherwise mostly vegan. And I firmly believe that for people that are serious about heart disease prevention, moving however is appropriate for you in that sort of direction will be a very positive step. Warrick, one of the other things that I've been really passionate about the last few years in practice is especially about benefits of aerobic fitness. And I think, as you know, we all tell our patients that your aerobic exercise capacity is one of the strongest predictors of longevity. So I do my best to try and practice that, and we'll be out exercising. I think in the mornings is a great start because then it's done. So this morning on a Sunday, I was out swimming in one of the ocean pools in Sydney, and it was a beautiful sunny morning and invigorating. And often I'll complement aerobic exercise with a more contemplative practice and movement-based practice, such as yoga, which is, I think, an outstanding practice, or a similar slower movement practice that both build strength and stability as we get older. They're both some of the cornerstones of my daily routine. As you know, sometimes it can be difficult to get the adequate amounts of sleep when you're in busy mode, and we're about to get back into the clinical year. But what's really interesting is that now it's become, the American Heart Association used to have Life Simple 7, and now they've included sleep as part of the eighth principle. And Warwick, you might have seen their recent review by Luigi Fontana in the European Heart Journal, just published, but he put it as one of the keys for cardiometabolic longevity.
Look, great kickoff there, Jason. Appreciate that. And what I'd love to do is circle back, tease out a couple of bits, and then maybe go through your day if you have time. And I'll share what I do at my end as well. I'm not vegan, so I'm particularly interested to hear, how did you make that change? How difficult was it? It sounds like your wife was already on that journey. Can you speak to that for me, please? And the listeners, so that they get a sense of what the world might be like without a sausage on the barbie.
So look, it helps immensely having a partner or someone to help you on that journey and encourage you and working together. My wife came for more humanitarian reasons, but we are fortunate that we live in, I live in Sydney, where there are wonderful choices to eat. You know, we have wonderful produce in Australia, with fruits and vegetables, and moving towards a more vegan or a more plant-based lifestyle. It is, for some of us, it is a challenge, and it's different to how we've traditionally brought up. I was born in South Africa, Warwick, where meat was very predominant and very part of our upbringing. My late grandfather was a butcher. We had lots of meat growing up. But learning to adapt to a plant-based eating has been a very positive step. There are so many resources for people who want to adopt a plant-based eating, and I usually refer patients to Michael Greger's website. There's a great website called Forks Over Knives, which also provides meal plans for people. But it's learning about how best to prepare meals from a vegan perspective. It's certainly introducing more legumes into your diet, and also realizing that you can get enough protein. You can get enough protein sources, and you can feel full and satiated on a plant-based diet. But it's great to also learn vegan recipes, and there is so much more out there. Even now in Sydney, we're very lucky that you go to some of the top fine dining restaurants and they will have a vegan option.
Yeah.
We went to one of the top restaurants called Omeggio at the Spit last year, and there was a vegan menu for us. It was the most unbelievable food, nutritious and fulfilling. And I would encourage people to just think about how they can even move a few nights a week in that, or a few nights a week plant-based. You don't have to do it all in one go, and that can be a bit overwhelming, but just try meat-free a few nights a week.
So some good suggestions there. And look, I really appreciate you sharing some of those resources, because that'll give people something else to go and have a look at and drill down a little bit deeper. One of the things that I'm sure you were probably thinking about as you made that transition was the impact on some of your own personal biochemistry and your own physiology. And so one of the questions that I'm sort of thinking of is, what did you notice, like maybe with your LDL cholesterol level, the so-called bad cholesterol, the total cholesterol, the triglycerides, your blood sugar levels, your weight maybe? I'm guessing you probably measured some of those things, or you've measured them over time. What sort of impacts have you noticed there, Jason?
So for most people who do adopt a plant-based diet, we generally, for me included, around a 25% reduction in LDL-C, in LDL-C, a reduction. I mean, often we see a reduction in C-reactive protein, which is a marker of inflammation, often a normalization of triglycerides. I've never had, fortunately, blood pressure has always been pretty good, and I'm able to maintain mostly what I think is a healthy weight. For people that the other, while vegan diets those benefits, we also interestingly can see a reduction in lipoprotein little a, which is a whole nother story that perhaps you and I should discuss as well. But we do see a reduction in biomarkers. So look, it has been a very positive metabolic benefit for me.
So one of the things that you mentioned, which I'd really like to put a little bit of a spotlight on for those listening or watching this, is you talked about catching up with Dean Ornish, who's incredibly well known in that space of dietary intervention for coronary artery disease. And I'm going to guess that you remember the references better than me, but as far as I can recall, 20 odd years ago or more, Dean Ornish ran a randomized double-blind controlled trial with lifestyle intervention and follow-up invasive coronary angiography. And what that means is that they actually stuck a tube inside people's arteries in the legs or in the wrist, passed that tube up into the arteries of the heart, took pictures, measured irregularities, measured narrowings, did that at time 0, and then did it again after the dietary intervention. Now, my understanding is that they showed regression of plaque with this lifestyle study. Would you like to speak to that? And what I will say is we've blown 10 minutes in no time at all. I tend to run to 10 to 15 if I can, but because this is so interesting, let's wrap this one up. And then actually maybe if you've got time, Jason, we could reschedule the opportunity to catch up and talk about your daily routines, because that's super interesting as well. But back to Dean Ornish.
Absolutely. And happy to do all of that. So Dean Ornish in the late 90s did exactly as you said, a double-blind randomized trial comparing people on the standard American Heart Association diet. And I will give you a caveat that I didn't back then, and I wouldn't think that that is such a healthy dietary pattern compared to now. However, compared it to a mostly vegan, which is and a very low saturated fat diet. And unfortunately, and the reason probably why it hasn't got much more fanfare in literature, because these studies are very difficult to do. So dietary intervention studies are very difficult to do, and they're very difficult to control for. But he did around 50 people. And you're right, he did show a mild regression of atherosclerosis in the people adopting a very low saturated fat plant-based diet. And I know for a lot of people listening and for a lot of patients that you see, Warrick, the concept of atherosclerosis and plaque regression is one that comes up very often. And I'm always asked in clinic, am I able to reverse some of this atherosclerosis plaque? And can I do it with diet and lifestyle? Or what will be complementary to the medications that you are suggesting to me? And this is where we have some evidence that this dietary pattern is able to regress atherosclerosis. And I think it forms one of the cornerstones of why we might recommend mostly plant-based diet.
Look, I think there's no question that this is an incredibly important area. We know from other observational studies and some of the long-term longitudinal studies that have looked at Seventh-day Adventists certainly support that in that cohort, their preference for a plant-based diet without question appears to be contributory to their reduced rate of cardiac event. When we're talking to our patients, or as people may be listening to this, we talk often about Mediterranean diet. Can you, just in the interest of time, Jason, we might wrap this particular podcast up after this last discussion point, but how do you bring that Mediterranean diet into the plant-based sort of conversation? How do you explain that to people and give them the knowledge and resources to explore that?
So I like to suggest to people to think about. I'm sure you've read this, Warrick, or recommend to your patients about the blue zones. And the blue zone diets, there were dietary patterns, as you've mentioned, one of the Seventh Day communities in Loma Linda, where is a predominantly not vegan but vegetarian diet that they have. And then there are a couple of regions centered around the Mediterranean, Sardinia, Icaria in Greece, and there's also some, similar regions around Icaria that have a Mediterranean diet. In actual fact, when you go in and analyze some of those diets in a little bit more detail, they are predominantly plant-based. The people there, some of them weren't able to afford meat very often, so they maybe had meat once or twice a month on celebrations. The amount of dairy was actually fairly small, and perhaps a small amount of cultured dairy, small amounts of cheese, but not large amounts to what we would have in a more Western style diet. So in fact, most of the Mediterranean style diet was predominantly plant-based. There are other aspects of that dietary pattern that have made it that are also make it probably more palatable and more westernized in a way, and that's plenty of olive oil, plenty of nuts. They have plenty of legumes. They have unrefined carbohydrates, whole grains, all of the dietary components that we know are associated with positive cardiovascular outcomes. So in a way, one of my other plant-based favorite sort of plant-based cardiologists is Dr. Ostfeld, he's in New York, and he's actually done an analysis of the PREDIMED study, which was the PREDIMED study was one of the largest dietary intervention studies published in the New England in 2013. So it's over 10 years old now, and then reanalyzed about 6 or 7 years later. And he showed that the more plant-based you made the Mediterranean style diet, the better the outcomes on biomarkers, meaning sort of lower cholesterol, lower CRP, lower blood pressure, higher levels of HDL.
Look, this is it's been an absolute pleasure sharing all this, Jason. For those listening, super grateful that you've hung in and enjoyed all this information. I've certainly learnt some bits and pieces, as I always do, sharing with colleagues. I hope you've learnt something as well. If you've got any queries or questions, if you've caught this on Facebook, drop us a note in the chat. Please subscribe, or drop us a note on info@drwarrickbishop.online if you have any queries, questions, or suggestions for other podcasts. For now, Jason, I'm going to thank you so much for sharing. Really do appreciate that. And the chance for us to get together and do this, as I said, after what seems like a couple of false starts, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Warrick.
I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to wish you the very best. Hope you live as well as possible, for as long as possible. Take care, and bye for now. Hi, ever wondered what your risk of heart attack is? You should. It's the single biggest killer in the Western world. We're talking one death less than every 30 minutes in Australia, one death less than every 60 seconds in the United States, 9 million deaths globally per annum. Well, how do you check your risk? Well, you can go to www.virtualheartcheck.com.au. You'll find out about your risk and what can be done beyond that to be even more precise.